Canto 3, Chapter 9. Rama's Prayers for Creative Energy. Text 10. Are we done?
Yeah.
Okay. What does that sound? Huh? Nana Manorata Diya Shana Bhagna Nidra Daiva Atarta Rachana Rishayo P Deva Yusmat Basanga Vimuka Iha Samsaranti. Ani Pritarta Karana Nishayana Nana Manorata Diya Shana Bhagna Nidra Daivartata Rachana Rishayo Pideva Yusmat Prasanga Vimuka Iha Samsaranti. Ani Patarta Karana Nishayana Nana Manorata Diya Shana Bhagna Nidra Daivartatarta Rachana Rishayo Pideva Yusmat Prasanga Vimuka Iha Samsaranti. Ani Patarta Karana Nishayanana Nana Manorata Diya Shana Bhagna Nidra Daivartatarta Rachana Rishayo Pideva Yusmat Prasanga Vimuka Iha Samsaranti. Ani, during the daytime. Paprita, engaged. Arta, distressing engagement. Karana, senses. Nishi, at night. Shayana, Nishayanana. Insomnia. Nana, various. Manorata, mental speculations. Diya, by intelligence. Shana, constantly. Bhagna, broken. Nidra, sleep. Daiva, superhuman. Ahata arta, frustrated. Rachana, plans. Vishaya, great sages. Api, also. Deva, O my Lord. Yusmad, your lordships. Prasanga, topic. Vimuka, turned against. Iha, in this material world. Samsaranti, to rotate. Such non-devotees engage their senses in very troublesome and extensive work, and they suffer insomnia at night because their intelligence constantly breaks their sleep with various mental speculations. They are frustrated in all their various plans by supernatural power. Even great sages, if they are against your transcendental topics, must rotate in this material world. Please repeat. Such non-devotees engage their senses in very troublesome and extensive work, and they suffer insomnia at night because their intelligence breaks their sleep with various mental speculations. They are frustrated in all their various plans by supernatural power. Even great sages, if they are against your transcendental topics, must rotate in this material world. Purport by His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada. As described in the previous verse, people who have no taste for the devotional service of the Lord are occupied in material engagements. Most of them engage during the daytime in hard physical labor. Their senses are engaged very extensively in troublesome duties in the gigantic plans of heavy industrial enterprise. The owners of such factories are engaged in finding a market for their industrial products, and the laborers are engaged in extensive production involving huge mechanical arrangements. Quote, factory, unquote, is another name for hell. At night, hellishly engaged persons take advantage of wine and women to satisfy their tired senses, but they are not even able to have sound sleep because their various mental speculative plans constantly interrupt their sleep. Because they suffer from insomnia, sometimes they feel sleepy in the morning for lack of sufficient rest. By the arrangement of supernatural power, even the great scientists and thinkers of the world suffer frustration of their various plans and thus rot in the material world birth after birth. A great scientist may make discoveries in atomic energy for the quick destruction of the world and may be awarded the best prize in recognition of his service, quote, or this service, unquote, but he also has to undergo the reactions of his work by rotating in the cycle of repeated births and deaths under the superhuman law of material nature. All these people who are against the principle of devotional service are destined to rotate in this material world without fail. This verse particularly mentions that even great sages who are averse to the principles of devotional service to the Lord are also condemned to undergo the terms of material existence. Not only in this age, but formerly also, there were many sages who tried to invent their own systems of religion without reference to devotional service to the Supreme Lord. But there cannot be any religious principle without devotional service to the Lord. The Supreme Lord is the leader of the entire range of living entities, and no one can be equal to or greater than him. Even the Lord's impersonal feature and all-pervading localized feature cannot be on an equal level with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Therefore, there cannot be any religion or system of genuine philosophy for the advancement of the living entities without the principle of devotional service. The impersonalists who take much trouble in penance and austerity for self-liberation may approach the impersonal Brahmajyoti, but ultimately, because of not being situated in devotional service, they glide down again to the material world to undergo another term of material existence. This is confirmed as follows. Yenye Ravindaksha Vimuktamaninas Vaastabhava Vasura Budaya Aruya Krichena Parampadam Tata Patanti Ado Nadrata Yusmad Angraya. Persons who are falsely under the impression of being liberated without devotional service to the Lord may reach the goal of the Brahmajyoti, but because of their impure consciousness and for want of shelter in the Vaikuntha Lokas, such so-called liberated persons again fall down into material existence. Bhagavatam, Canto 10, Chapter 2, Prayers for Lord Krishna in the Womb by the Demigods. Demigods' prayers for Lord Krishna in the Womb. Text 32. Therefore, no one can manufacture any system of religion without the principle of devotional service to the Lord. As we find in the 6th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, the initiator of religious principles is the Lord himself. In Bhagavad Gita also, we find that the Lord condemns all forms of religion other than that which entails the process of surrendering unto the Supreme. Any system which leads one to the devotional service of the Lord and nothing else is actually religion or philosophy. In the 6th canto, we find the following statements of Yamaraj, the controller of all unfaithful living entities. Dharmantu shakshad bhagavat pranitam nabhaividori vishayo napi deva asida mukya asura manusya kutonus vidyadhara adaranadya Svayambur Narada Sambhu Kumara Kapilo Manu Palado Janako Bhishmo Balir Vyasakir Vayam Vabaisate Vijanimo Dharman Bhagavata Bata Guyam Vishudam Durlabham Yam Janapranam Ashnute. Principles of religion are initiated by the Supreme Personality of Godhead and no one else, including the sages and demigods. can manufacture any such principles, since even great sages and demigods are unauthorized to inaugurate such principles of religion, what to speak of others. The so-called mystics, demons, human beings, Vidyadharas, and Charanas living in the lower planets, 12 personalities: Brahma, Narada, Lord Shiva, Kumara, Kapila, Manu, Prahlad Maharaj, Janaka, Maharaj, Bhishma, Bali, Shukadeva Goswami, and Yamaraj are agents of the Lord authorized to speak and propagate the principles of religion. Bhagavatam, Canto 6, Chapter 3. Yamaraj instructs his messengers, text 19 through 21. The principles of religion are not open to any ordinary living entity. They are just to bring the human being onto the platform of morality, nonviolence, etc. To the platform of morality, period. Nonviolence, etc. are necessary for misguided persons because unless one is moral and nonviolent, one cannot understand the principles of religion. To understand what is actually religion is very difficult, even if one is situated in the principles of morality and nonviolence. It is very confidential because as soon as one is conversant with the real principles of religion, he's at once liberated to the eternal life of bliss and knowledge. Therefore, one who is not situated in the principles of devotional service to the Lord should not pose himself as a religious leader to the innocent public. The Ishopanishad emphatically forbids this nonsense in the following mantra: Anda tama pravishyanti ye sambhutim upashyate tato bhuya ivate tamo ya u sambhutyam mata. Ishopanishad verse 12. A person in ignorance of the principles of religion, who therefore does nothing in the matter of religion, is far better than a person who misguides others in the name of religion without reference to the factual religious principles of devotional service. Such so-called leaders of religion are sure to be condemned by Brahma and other great personalities. Om Jnanatimurandasya Jananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Militam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Dhyena Bhutale Svayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Svapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shuta Parakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatan Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Varijana Sahitam Shri Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishaka Vidamscha. Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bando Jagatpate Gopisha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namo Stute. Jayatam Sarato Pangor Mama Mandamater Gati Matsarvasva Padambo Jo Radha Madana Mohano Dibya Vrindaranya Kalpadru Mada Sriman Ratnagara Singhasana Sto Sriman Radha Srila Govinda Devo Prestalabi Savyamano Smarami Shriman Rasa Rasarambi Bamsi Batatastitaha Karshan Venu Svanar Gopir Gopinata Shriye Stuna Tapta Kanchan Gorangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpatarubias Cha Kripa Sindhubheva Cha Patitanam Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Hare Ram, Ram Ani Patartha Karana Nishi Nishan Chayana Nana Manorata Diyashana Bhagnanidla Daivarta Tarta Rachana Rishiopi Deva Yusmat Pasanga Vimuka Iha Samsaranti. Such non-devotees engage their senses, very troublesome and extensive work, and they suffer insomnia at night because their intelligence constantly breaks their sleep with various mental speculations. They are frustrated in all their various plans by supernatural power. Even great sages, they are against your transcendental topics, must rotate in this material world. So, the epic chapter 9, promised prayers for creative energy, similar to chapter 9 of the second canto, answers by citing the Lord's version. The scene is the same. Lord Brahma discovers that he's alone in this universe and is perplexed about his situation. The devastating water, coming to grips with his task of situating all the different planetary systems and all the gradations of living entities in all the different modes of material natures and their variations. And he realizes that he must perform tapasya and austerity to be blessed with the mercy, the intelligence by the Lord, from the Lord, to perform his service. So he is offering prayers on the self-realized platform, and many beautiful verses going all the way to verse 26 of this chapter, where the Lord will appear and, like the Lord instructed, which contains the epic Chatur Shloki in the second canto, the Lord, as always, offers very, very beautiful reciprocation and instruction to Lord Brahma. To give a little hint, of course, the concluding words that the Lord says, I am the super soul of every individual. This is verse 42, the second to last verse. I am the supreme director and the dearest. People have wrongly attached to the gross and subtle bodies that they should be attracted to me only. Previous, it's the opinion of expert transcendentalists that the ultimate goal of performing all traditional good works, penances, sacrifices, charities, mystic activities, trances, etc., is to invoke my satisfaction. Prabhupada says in one place, no one has anything else to do except perform direct devotional service to the Lord. That conviction is necessary, and to the degree that we have that more advanced, makes our mission to the Guru Parampara, to our spiritual master, to preach the holy gospel of Lord Chaitanya more easy and efficacious. No one has anything else to do except to perform the direct devotional service of the Lord. That is the right decision for all intelligent men. One's only concern should be to satisfy the Lord by one's activities. If the Lord is satisfied by an action, whatever it may be, then it is successful. Otherwise, it is simply a waste of time. That's another easy maxim to apply. If the Lord is satisfied by an action, whatever it may be, then it is successful. Otherwise, it is simply a waste of time. The Supreme Lord is the dearest in both the conditioned and liberated states. When a person does not know that the Lord is the only dearmost object, then he is in the conditioned state of life. And when one knows perfectly well that the Lord is the only dearmost object, he is considered to be liberated. There are degrees of knowing one's relationship with the Lord, depending on the degree of realization as to why the Supreme Lord is the dearmost object of every living being. The real reason is clearly stated in Bhagavad Gita 15:7. Mama Vamso Jiva Loke Jiva Bhuta Sanatana. The living entities are eternally parts and parcels of the Supreme Lord. The living entity is called the Atma, and the Lord is called the Paramatma. The living entity is called Brahman, and the Lord is called the Parabrahman, or the Parameshvar, Ishvara, Parama, Krishna, the conditioned souls who do not have self-realization except the material body as the dearmost. The idea of the dearmost is then spread all over the body, both concentrated and extended. The attachment from one's own body and its extensions, like children, relatives, is actually developed on the basis of the real living entity. As soon as the real living entity is out of the body, even the body of the most dear son is no longer attractive. Because the living entities are parts and parcels of the whole living entity, that supreme living entity is the factual basis of affection for all. One who has forgotten the basic principle of his love for everything has only flickering love because he is in Maya. The more one is affected by the principle of Maya, the more he is detached from the basic principle of love. One cannot factually love anything unless he is fully developed in the loving service of the Lord. And Prabhupada concludes this wonderful second to last verse purport by saying, in all circumstances, one should try to develop love of Godhead, and that will solve all contending problems. So up until now, verse 10, Lord Brahma has been describing the very precarious situation of the fallen conditioned souls in this material world. Describing in appeal to the, in not just describing like they're like this, they're like that, like, you know, some external observation with no empathy, but with great sympathy and empathy and appealing directly to the Lord. This is standard of all pure devotees. Our Srila Prabhupada on the Commonwealth Pier of Boston, Massachusetts. I wish that you may deliver them. All these poor creatures are constantly perplexed by hunger, thirst, severe cold, secretions, and bile, attacked by coughing winter, blasting summer, rains, and many other disturbing elements, and overwhelmed by strong sex urges and indefatigable anger. I take pity on them and am very much aggrieved for them. A pure devotee of the Lord, like Brahma and persons in his disciplic succession, are always unhappy to see the perplexities of the conditioned souls. So living in a city like New York gives one ample opportunity to always feel that unhappiness by seeing the perplexities of conditioned souls. If we retreat to some idyllic pastoral setting in nature, we think everything is nice and wonderful. To be in such a place, if it's for the service of the Lord, to develop farm community and varnashram, of course, that's another story. But for our own so-called peace and this and that, Prahlad Maharaj teaches us that, Prabhupada writes, that the pure devotee is not interested in, you know, meditating in the Himalayas or a peaceful place, but his interest is in the busiest places of the world, in the cities where he's very very busily engaged in propagating Krishna consciousness. My dear Lord Nrsingadev, I do not wish to be liberated alone, leaving aside all these poor fools and rascals, because I know without devotional service to you that one cannot be happy. Not knowing adequate measures for relieving such difficulties, suffering persons sometimes pose themselves as leaders of the people, as we're hearing in today's verse, and Prabhupada directs us to one of the knockout verses of the Upanishad. Andatama pravishanti sambhutim upashate tatobuyat ivate tamo ya u sambhutyam rata. Somebody bring up the direct translation to that. And referring to Prahlad Maharaj's blind man leading another blind man to fall into a ditch. Therefore, unless the devotees of the Lord, go ahead.
Those who are engaged in the worship of demigods enter into the darkest region of ignorance, and still more so do the worshippers of the impersonal absolute.
And Prabhupada is referring to those who teach such so-called paths. Yes, that's what Prabhupada says here. Far better to be just ignorant yourself than to pose as a so-called leader and mislead others. Therefore, unless the devotees of the Lord take pity on them and teach them the right path, their lives are hopeless failures. The devotees of the Lord who voluntarily take the responsibility of raising the foolish materialistic sense enjoyers are as confidential to the Lord as Lord Brahma. And our very own Lord Brahma, Madhva, Gaudiya, Rupanuga, Sampradaya has appeared as the, Prabhupada describes Haridas Thakur in the teachings of Lord Chaitanya, or the introduction to Srimad Bhagavatam, a short sketch of the life of Lord Chaitanya, the dean or authority on the Dharma for this age, the chanting of the holy name. Prabhupada said he was pleased that Lord Brahma, appearing as Haridas Thakur, was pleased to accept his birth in a Mohammedan family. Lord Brahma spreads his party, that is the Brahma Sampradaya, to reclaim the fallen conditioned souls. There are many renegades from the Brahma Sampradaya, and their business is to confuse people, put people in ignorance. The Lord is never pleased with such renegades. All right. Varshana Maharaj, he comments on Prabhupada's visit to New Vrindavan in June of 1974. Prabhupada was looking at all of the land, and he said, why is this land not being cultivated? And the realization that Varshana Maharaj spoke was that Prabhupada could understand the complete integration between the land and nature, and what the devotees should do, the real meaning of cow protection. If you're not relying on the bull and the cow for your material upkeep, then you can't really fully realize the inner purport of what cow protection is actually all about. And the example of the perfect mode of living to cultivate the highest level of devotional service is lacking. And that's the charter that Srila Prabhupada particularly saw or wanted for New Vrindavan and other similar farm communities. So the opposite of depending on Krishna's arrangement, Prabhupada was walking on Juhu Beach, and he took a particularly long walk that day, way down, and there was a statue of Mahatma Gandhi. And the devotee, I forget who was recounting this, I think it was Bhagavat, now Bhagavat Maharaj. Prabhupada paid his respects to Gandhi, and then he said to Bhagavat and maybe some other disciples, there weren't any other Mr. Patel or their friends, and he wanted to argue, said, I love Gandhi. He wanted the best thing for India. Because when the British left, Gandhi's idea was to make all the villages self-sufficient. But it was Nehru and others who pushed the factory. So there's the chapter in the Lifetime in Preparation, Volume 1 of Prabhupada Leela Amrita, New Delhi, 1950s, struggling alone in the wilderness. Prabhupada actually saw this terrible nightmare introduced by the first leaders of the so-called free India, and how it just created a hellish pandemonium, as described here in the first paragraph of this purport. And those of us who have been to India, of course, they've kind of cleaned it up or put some cosmetic facelift to it. But I remember traveling from Delhi to Vrindavan in the 1980s. It was you pass all these factories, and the horrible smell is coming out, and you just see, the workers riding their bicycles into these gigantic monolithic monstrosities, whole little shantytown villages around them, and everybody's all black and dirty, and just factory is another name for hell. So being engaged in ugra karma, it agitates the mind and senses. And instead of here, we're working for Krishna, and we're inspired to, offer prayers to the Lord, to sing and dance for the Lord, to want to, our desire to see beautiful things is just simply focused on seeing the Lord, associating only with devotees, only with those who are endeavoring to control their mind and senses and make Krishna the dear, most lovable object of their life and heart. We have no interest in making friendship and associating intimately with people who are fond of illicit sex, intoxication, eating, and gambling, because we're performing devotional service. If we leave the association of devotees where this concentration is lacking, and we associate with the non-devotees, then very quickly we will become like that. Even Hiranyakashipu, who showed some faint understanding of Vedic wisdom, said that association is just like a crystal glass. Of course, and his idea was that Prahlad Maharaj, if you associate with devotees, he'll become, how did he say, the Sunda Marka, contaminated like them. So you have to be very, very careful. It's like if you have a crystal glass and you put it on a shining light, we see that Mahavishnu Maharaj, right, Gopal Champa, they had a fancy new microphone that had all these lights on it, and it was very colorful. So anyway, makes the Harinam more spectacular. But anyway, what you associate with, you become like. Then the next part of the purport, the majority, 2 pages full, is how only Krishna is authorized to create a religious system. And that religious system is based upon developing pure devotional service, a loving relationship with him. The principles of religion are not open to any ordinary living entity. It is very difficult to understand. And Prabhupada brings up the principles of morality and nonviolence. We see even Arjuna. He wanted to be a moral and nonviolent person. He thought he's practicing the principles of religion, but Krishna provoked him. No, I don't want you to become nonviolent. I want you to be violent. And morality means, in this case, to kill your guru, to kill your grandfather, Bhishma Dev, to kill your cousin brothers and all your friends and contemporaries. How to understand? Of course, never was there a time when I did not exist, nor you, nor all these kings, nor in the future shall any of us cease to be. The soul cannot be killed by any weapon, etc., etc. And what is the plan? Krishna's plan. So if anyone else was to tell Arjuna to do that, he would be giving an instruction to engage Arjuna in greatly sinful activity. What is the word they use these days? Crimes against humanity. But because Krishna is saying to do it, it's the highest religious principle. Yes, my illusion is now gone, and I am firm and free from doubt, and I am prepared to act according to your instructions. And Arjuna is eternally glorified for his surrender to wanting that. There's the example of Maharaj Yudhishthir, he never told a lie in his life. The son of Yamaraj, Damaraj. But because Krishna asked him to tell to Dronacharya, Ashvatthama is dead. So Ashvatthama is the name of Dronacharya's son, and it's also the name of an elephant. Whose elephant was Ashvatthama? The elephant Ashvatthama belonged to, anyway, we don't have any Mahabharat scholars here. Okay, so he wanted to make Dronacharya become depressed and bewildered. This was part of the military tactic, So he's saying to Yudhishthir technically is not lying by saying that Ashvatthama, did the Ashvatthama elephant, was he killed? Anyway, so he's like, the elephant. Anyway, whatever. So there's a little factoid to add to the nuance to the thing. But he's born in Dubai, so you're born in India, or okay, India. All right. So perhaps the most poignant example also in the Srimad Bhagavatam is the Maharaj Chitraketu. Bhima killed the elephant Ashvatthama. So Krishna was asking Yudhishthir Maharaj to not really tell a lie, but to a little tricky. So he meets Anantadev and he offers prayers in ecstasy. Oh, unconquerable one, when you spoke about Bhagavad Dharma, which is the uncontaminated religious system for achieving the shelter of your lotus feet, that was your victory. Persons who have no material desires, like the Kumaras, like we're hearing here, the 12 Mahajans, they are fit to speak on what is religious principles. Or self-satisfied sages worship you to be liberated from material contamination. In other words, they accept the process of Bhagavad Dharma to achieve your lotus feet. And on the other hand, as described here, the factory is another name for hell, and the Mayavadi impersonalists who andatamat pravishyanti, being full of contradictions, all forms of religion, but Bhagavad Dharma, work under conceptions of fruited results and distinctions of you and I and yours and mine. The followers of Srimad Bhagavatam have no such consciousness. They're all Krishna conscious, thinking that they are Krishna's and Krishna is theirs. There are other low-class religious systems which are contemplated for the killing of enemies or the gain of mystic power, but such religious systems, being full of passion and envy, are impure and temporary. It's a very fanatical religious system, or an so-called interpretation of such, conquered India in the Middle Ages, and particularly went after the followers of Vedic culture, more or less giving them the choice, if they didn't kill them on sight, accept our religion and convert, or we will torture you to death in the most hideous ways. Such religious systems, being full of passion and envy, are impure and temporary. Because they are full of envy, they are full of irreligion. How can a religious system that produces envy of oneself and of others be beneficial for oneself and for them? What is auspicious about following such a system? What is actually to be gained? By causing pain to one's own self due to self-envy, and by causing pain to others, one arouses your anger and practices irreligion. My dear Lord, one's occupational duty is instructed in Srimad Bhagavatam and Bhagavad Gita according to your point of view. Answers by citing the Lord's version. That is my opinion, Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita. Never deviates from the highest goal of life. Those who follow their occupational duties under your supervision, being equal to all living entities, moving and non-moving, and not considering high and low, are called Aryans. Such Aryans worship you, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Ani patarta karana nishi nashayana nana manorata diya shana bhagna nidra daivartatar rachana vishayopi deva yusmat pasanga vimuka iha samsaranti. Such non-devotees engage their senses in very troublesome and extensive work, and they suffer insomnia at night because their intelligence constantly breaks their sleep with various mental speculations. They're frustrated in all their various plans by supernatural power. Even great sages, if they're against your transcendental topics, must rotate in this material world. Hare Krishna. Thank you very much. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Any question or comment? 9 o'clock. Thank you very much. Shishi Radha Govinda ki jai, Nitai Gaur Premanandi Hari Hari Bol. Grace Gopal Champa Prabhu ki jai. Hare Krishna.